My name is Richard Snowhawk, and I woke up to a noise I couldn't place, staring at wooden beams I didn't recognize. An old man was leaning over me with the particular expression of someone who has been waiting to see whether a person would open their eyes or not, and wasn't certain which outcome to expect. His name was Edwin, and his worry was written into every line of his face. The memories came in a flood. In a life I remembered, I had been a gamer, the kind of person who spent hundreds of hours in strategy titles, who understood troop trees and resource management and siege mechanics the way a craftsman understands his tools. That person was gone now. What remained was Richard Snowhawk, the weak, dissolute heir of a minor noble family, a man who had hidden in the wine cellar while his father died fighting orc raiders above him. The castle was full of refugees. The walls were damaged. The treasury held 500 dinars and a great deal of silence. Then a transparent interface materialized in the air before me, and I felt something that was either relief or recognition. War system activated. My stats appeared in clean columns. A handful of guards, a few terrified farmers, one notable figure in the hall below, a powerfully built man with one eye, Captain Galvin Iron Anvil, whose presence the system flagged immediately as a morale stabilizer for the broken soldiers around him. I had played enough of these games to know what to do first. I went to the treasury, took the remaining 300 silver coins, and spent 900 dinars total, going into debt, to recruit 20 Imperial recruits and 5 light cavalry through the system interface. The transaction completed in silence. By midnight, the soldiers had arrived at the castle as if they had always been there, bearing the Snow Eagle crest on their equipment, their loyalty registering at 80% from the moment they appeared. I led them out under cover of darkness toward the orc encampment. The system map showed me everything: guard positions, the location of captured villagers, the placement of their food storage. I took out the family hunting bow, a Snow Eagle longbow that had belonged to my father, and the system's targeting overlay activated, marking critical points in pale blue light. 2 sentries, 2 arrows. The second body was still falling when I put a shot into their food stores, and the resulting fire did the rest of the work for me. While the orcs scrambled toward the flames, my new recruits locked their spear wall and advanced. I worked the bow from distance, the targeting system guiding each shot to joints, throats, exposed eyes. When an orc berserker charged the line, I put an arrow through his eye socket from 40 meters. The cavalry swept the flanks. What remained of the orc force scattered into the dark hills. I ordered the survivors captured rather than killed, then stood in the pre-dawn quiet and watched the system log the results. Mission complete. Defend the homeland. Experience gained. Level 2 achieved. Reward: 500 dinars. The debt was nearly cleared. The sun was coming up over the castle walls, turning the cold stone gold. I looked at the interface and felt, for the first time since waking up in this world, like the situation was manageable. Morning brought clarity and complications in equal measure. Edwin delivered the battle report with professional composure, but the numbers underneath the victory were uncomfortable. Daily income: 117 dinars. Food stocks: dangerously low. Help from the capital: weeks away, at minimum. I focused on the refugees first. Blankets and hot porridge from our limited stores, distributed immediately. 47 new people, 12 of them capable laborers. It cost supply we couldn't easily replace, but morale among the castle's inhabitants shifted visibly when they saw it happen. The system map showed me the full scope of the orc damage to the surrounding villages and farmlands. It was worse than the initial report suggested. Then Galvin brought me a prisoner. The orc was injured and defiant, restrained in the lower hall with the particular contempt of someone who expects to be executed and has decided to face it standing. Galvin translated his message without editorializing. Chieftain Grull of the Bloodscar tribe planned to attack in 3 nights. The message was a threat dressed as information. I had him taken to the dungeon, treated for his wounds, and locked in a proper cell. His name, I learned, was Grash Bloodfawn. I needed him alive. The castle hall hummed with overlapping anxieties. The farmers needed food. The blacksmith needed charcoal to get his forge running. The walls had a collapsed section that anyone with a ladder and ambition could walk through. The system organized these into a priority list without sentiment. Food first, then defenses. I assigned 5 workers to Grim the blacksmith and went to the collapsed wall section after dark. 30 dinars. I confirmed the repair through the system interface and watched the stones move themselves back into position with the quiet precision of something that had been waiting for permission. By morning, the wall was solid and perfect, and the soldiers who saw it first treated it with the careful reverence people reserve for things they can't explain. That night, deep in the wine cellar, I upgraded 3 of my Imperial recruits to full infantry. Better weapons, better armor, better chance of survival. The cost was 45 dinars. The result was 3 men who stood differently when they walked back into the morning light. The drill I ran on the 3rd morning confirmed what I already suspected. My system troops were precise and disciplined in ways that made the native garrison look ragged by comparison. I warned everyone that we were moving to wartime rations. The real fight was coming. The system alert confirmed it an hour later. Orc scouts in the mountains. Main force arriving within 2 days. I was standing on the wall processing this when Galvin reported a new group of refugees approaching the gate. More than 20 of them, cold and exhausted. Among them, the system flagged one figure immediately. Royce Blackblade. Level 15 hero unit. Tactical aptitude. Exceptional. I opened the gates. I offered him a safe winter in exchange for his help. His loyalty registered at 65 before I finished the sentence. In the war room that evening, Royce studied the Orc approach routes and frowned. The path they were taking was wrong. Too indirect for a straight raid, too deliberate for opportunism. He said it suggested a hidden motivation. Edwin arrived while we were still talking, carrying something pulled from the battle spoils, a piece of iron ore, high quality, dark red with unusual veining. Royce looked at it and confirmed what we were both thinking. The Bloodscar tribe had found a mine. I decided to keep it quiet and focus every resource on defense. The mine would matter later. Survival came first. The next visitor was an envoy from a neighboring lord named Horn Greystone. The offer was 50 elite soldiers in exchange for marriage to his lord's 17-year-old niece, a girl I had never heard of. I refused without hesitation and told the envoy that the Snowhawk family handled its own problems. He left with a comment about our poverty that I let pass, because keeping my independence was worth considerably more than his opinion of it. That night, I went down to the dungeon with a piece of venison and a flask of dwarven liquor. Grash Bloodfong watched me approach with the wariness of a creature that has learned not to expect kindness from humans, especially from the ones holding the keys. I sat down on the opposite side of the bars and pushed the food through. He ate. He drank. The system tracked his recruitment progress moving upward and warned me simultaneously that bringing an orc into my service would cost me 30 days of reduced morale among my human soldiers. I accepted the cost and filed it away. Under the influence of the liquor, Grash told me about the mine, a landslide 2 months ago that had exposed an iron vein in the mountains, currently guarded by roughly 50 warriors at the mining camp, while Chieftain Grull led the main force south. He was still talking when Royce appeared at the dungeon entrance with the expression of someone who has learned something bad. Scouts reporting at least 500 orcs moving toward the castle. Not a raiding party, a migration. The Bloodscar tribe was moving its entire people. Before first light, Royce confirmed that the main force had reached the northern village. I spent 900 dinars recruiting 30 Imperial archers through the system, went into debt again without hesitation, and climbed to the battlements to watch them arrive. The new archers materialized at the castle gate, looking professional and purposeful, bearing the snow eagle crest, and the morale of every soldier on the wall lifted visibly just from the sight of them. The system then unlocked the defense mode and offered me 4 catapults. I placed them on the wall. The old family seal appeared on each one. I hadn't arranged that, but I wasn't going to complain about it. The soldiers who saw them concluded it was an ancestral blessing and fought harder because of it. The orc army numbered around 300 warriors when they appeared on the field below. Chief Grull rode a giant wolf, visible above the heads of his warriors, and I could see him scanning the walls with the particular attention of someone who has done this before. The catapults spoke first. For simultaneous impacts, tore gaps in the advancing formation, and the orcs spread into a looser approach pattern immediately. Smarter than game AI, I noted. They'd done this before. When they reached the walls with ladders, I switched to the bow. The system's targeting overlay mapped the critical points: joints, throat gaps, the exposed skin above armor collars. I shot the standard bearer and watched the momentary confusion ripple through the formation below like a stone dropped in water. When an orc hauled itself over the wall, and I put 3 arrows through it before it landed, the system logged a new skill unlock. The east wall began to buckle. I sent Royce there and kept working the bow, earning what the system called the Ladder Guardian achievement by picking off climbers before they could establish a foothold. The gate was another matter. The battering ram was a serious piece of engineering, driven by a coordinated team of heavy warriors with iron plate. I put armor-piercing arrows through the commander directing it, but they were already into the 3rd swing when the wood finally failed. Grull came through the gate on his wolf like something carved out of old stone. My first arrow hit him in the shoulder. It slowed him. It wasn't enough. He nearly killed me with the battle axe. The wolf moving faster than the system had suggested it would, the swing coming from an angle I hadn't accounted for. Galvin and the Imperial infantry formed a shield wall between us and bought me the seconds I needed. I dropped the bow, drew a sword, cut his arm, lost the sword when he knocked it aside, grabbed a broken spear shaft from the ground. Galvin drove a dagger into Grull's side from behind. A distraction, a half second, exactly enough. I put the broken spear through Grull's shoulder and drove it home. He fell, and the battle fell with him. 1,000 experience points. Level 3. New talent. Orc Slayer. We opened the gates and drove the remaining force from the field. By sunset, the count showed nearly 300 orcs dead, my losses low, and 2,000 dinars with 800 units of grain added to the territory's accounts. Grash requested to see me that evening while the celebration was still going in the hall above. He told me what I had already suspected from the system data. The Bloodskar tribe was finished as an independent force. The chieftain was dead, the warriors were broken, the remaining people needed somewhere to go. He laid it out plainly, without asking for anything. He just stated facts and waited. The system offered me 3 options for handling the defeated tribe. I told Grash he could lead his remaining people as warriors under my command if he submitted fully. He looked at me for a long moment, a single-eyed evaluation that carried more weight than most conversations I'd had since arriving in this world. And then he knelt. The system deducted 30 days of human soldier morale from my account and deposited 22 loyal orc warriors into my order of battle. I returned to the banquet hall, knowing exactly what that choice had cost and believing it was worth it. She was standing by the fireplace when I walked in. A silver-gray cloak, silver hair that caught the firelight like something metallic, pointed ears and emerald eyes that had been examining the orc battle axe on the wall with the expression of a professional appraiser finding the workmanship inadequate. Crude forging, she said before I could speak. Unworthy of orc work from the Frost Whisper Mountains. Every soldier in the room had unconsciously created a perimeter of empty space around her. I noticed my hand had moved to my sword hilt without my deciding it should. She placed one hand over her heart and introduced herself with the composed grace of someone who has never once felt out of place anywhere. I am Ethel, Ranger of the Silverpine clan. We observed your battle from the mountains. We have been watching this territory for some time. I kept my expression neutral. The Silverpine clan's arrows could have reached the field. More lives might have survived with Elven support. We do not intervene in human conflicts. Her tone was even, especially when traitors were friendly masks. She reached into her cloak and placed a blood-stained cloth on the table between us. Through the staining, the emblem of a roaring bear's head was clearly visible. The same crest that had been on the sleeve of Horn Greystone's envoy. My jaw tightened slightly. He was at the orc camp, the night before his offer of alliance. Ethel confirmed. He sent the orcs to do what marriage couldn't accomplish. Absorb your territory into his while you were still recovering from the attack he arranged. I led her to the council chamber and asked for proof in a voice that was steadier than I felt. She produced a map, Frost Whisper Mountains, a red line running from the Bloodskar camp to my northern village, a notation in 2 languages confirming the exchange. Food and weapons for an attack on Snowhawk lands. Why does the Silverpine clan want me to have this? I asked directly. Her emerald eyes narrowed slightly. Horn's miners have been cutting the sacred Silverpine forest. 3 ancient trees have already fallen. Our seer heard the mother trees cry. I understood the shape of it. Information and support from the elves. In exchange, Horn's logging operation ends. A perceptive little lord. The sharpness in her smile was not unkind. She clapped twice, softly, and 2 elven warriors stepped out of shadows carrying an oak chest. The system interface flared gold when the lid opened. Special unit discovered. Botanian archer, elven training. Hidden unit tree unlocked. Recruitable. Requires elf friendship greater than or equal to 80. 20 longbows lay in the chest, each wrapped in silver vine-patterned leather. Ethel lifted 1 arrow and placed it on string. Armor piercing. Will punch through an oak shield 3 fingers thick. She released it into a support pillar, and the shaft was still trembling when she turned back to me. What's the price? I asked. Stop Horn's logging. Allow us to oversee the mining operations. Not to interfere with your profits, but to ensure the work doesn't cause lasting damage to the natural environment. I considered the system's mining infrastructure, which didn't even require wooden supports by design. Accepted. On one condition, you help train my archers personally. The smile she gave me was the first fully genuine one I'd seen from her. She was gone before I finished formulating a follow-up question, leaving behind only the chest of longbows and a scent like pine needles after rain. The morning after Ethel's visit, I spread her map on the council table. Galvin put his fist through the table's edge when he understood what he was looking at. Royce stared at the red lines with cold, measuring eyes. Edwin asked what we were going to do, given that Horn's fortress held 3 times our military strength. We won't fight him directly, I said. We don't need to. Horn believed the Orcs and I had destroyed each other. He believed the Bloodskar mining camp held 50 wounded survivors too demoralized to resist. He was going to lead his 200 elite soldiers into the Frost Whisper Mountains to claim that mine under the legal cover of destroying a savage threat to the kingdom. Legitimate, clean, beneficial. I pointed to Bloodclaw Canyon on the map. A narrow passage, steep walls, perfect stonefall geometry. 1 route in, no clean route out. I looked at Grash. How many of your fighters are still at the mine camp? 50, he said. The old and wounded. They will follow whoever brings Grull's axe as proof of succession. I sent Edwin for the axe and told Grash what I needed him to do. 3 days later, Horn Greystone led his 200 elite soldiers into the canyon behind a scout report that promised easy prey. I watched from the cliff top as they moved into the kill zone. Horn at the front in ornate armor, surrounded by a dozen knights, already composing the story he'd tell about liberating a royal mine from savage occupation. The deep orc horn sounded when the last rider cleared the canyon's narrowest point. Boulders came from both sides simultaneously. The retreat was sealed before the echo finished. Below, horses screamed and armor clashed as 200 men tried to reorganize in a space that didn't accommodate it. Horn's voice shrieked above the noise, ordering a defense against just wild orcs. And then my archers appeared on the cliff tops in snow eagle cloaks, and his lieutenant took a bone arrow through the throat before he finished raising his shield. Grash brought his warriors down the slope when the signal arrow went up. They hit the remaining force from behind with the controlled fury of people who had lost their chieftain and their home and needed somewhere to put it. When the last Greystone soldier fell, the canyon was very quiet. Horn was on the ground with Grash's knee on his chest, his golden armor covered in blood and dirt. He offered ransom. He offered land. He offered testimony. His eyes were doing the calculation that people do when they finally understand there is no calculation to make. I took Grull's axe from Grash and tested its weight. Conspiring with orcs to attack a noble's lands, I said quietly. That's a capital offense under kingdom law. I'm afraid I can't afford to be merciful about it. Horn's eyes went wide with the specific fear of someone who has just realized the younger, poorer, supposedly weaker adversary was the one who had been playing strategically all along. I nodded to Grash. Battle report. Bloodclaw Canyon. Perfect ambush. Greystone Fortress Elite Soldiers. 213. Greystone Knights. 15. Total experience. 5,445. Loot. 3,200 dinars. 30 iron-plated armors. 15 warhorses. 500 units of grain. Level up 4. I stood at the canyon's edge, watching the upgrade glow settle over my troops, and thought that things were finally beginning to move in the right direction. The iron ore in the Frost Whisper Mountains had a dark red hue that caught the morning light like something alive. I stood at the newly opened mine entrance and watched the system interface build out the development projections. Red iron vein, medium quality. Estimated daily output, 50 units. Development cost, 500 dinars. I confirmed it and watched the mine entrance widen on its own, wooden supports extending from the rock walls like growing things, rails and minecarts forming from what had been solid stone a moment before. The orc craftsmen following behind watched with their fingers wrapped around bone-tooth charms. Grash shouted something in the orc tongue about Snow Eagle Lord magic and the new home of the Bloodscar tribe, which was as good an explanation as any. I built them a proper village nearby, dome-shaped longhouses in orc style, thin smoke rising from new chimneys by the end of the week. The system had charged me in wood and stone. The loyalty numbers it returned were significantly better than any alternative. Ethel appeared beside me without warning, which I was beginning to expect from her. "Your magic is unusual," she said carefully. "It doesn't harm the tree roots." I smiled without explaining and pointed to a hillside at a comfortable distance from the castle. Would that location work for the Silver Pine clan's training ground? Close enough for supply runs, far enough for your people's privacy. She studied the hill with the measuring gaze of someone calculating drainage, sunlight angles, and escape routes simultaneously. "A wise choice," she said, which I was learning was her version of high praise. The road to the capital offered 2 routes. Through the Black Forest in 10 days, with a 40% chance of encountering something unfriendly, or through River Valley Town in 13 days, with access to the largest grain market in the northern region. My territory needed food more than speed. I chose a long way. River Valley Town was busier than I'd expected. Caravans from the south, northern lords selling furs, the constant organized noise of a place where money moved. The market smelled of livestock and spice and the particular desperation of commercial competition. I was heading for the grain store when the argument caught my attention. A well-dressed merchant had a thin man on his knees in the mud and a guard's sword at his throat, presenting evidence of account fraud with the controlled fury of someone who has been professionally betrayed. The thin man was confessing to a clerk named Jerome in exchange for a 10% cut. The system flagged the merchant immediately. Former spice caravan leader. Fraud detection, 25%. Currently experiencing significant financial losses through subordinate corruption. Recruitable. I watched Marco realize the scope of what had happened to him, then watched him register my Snow Eagle badge and offer the approximation of professional courtesy that exhausted people manage when they've run out of better options. "How long will it take to recover the stolen money?" I asked. "What do you mean exactly, my lord?" His pupils sharpened the way professionals do when they suspect a trap that might also be an opportunity. I produced a bag of gold and made him an offer. I would buy the entire caravan, including its debts, and he would continue managing it. The Snow Eagle territory needed a direct trade route to the capital. He could either spend the next several months in financial recovery, or he could take the deal and redirect his skills towards something that had a future. Marco looked at the gold for a moment, then kicked the fleeing servant so efficiently it barely interrupted our conversation. "Deal. But I handle the internal discipline personally." Screaming for the cargo hold followed, and the system logged a fraud probability reduction of 90% for the following 3 months. At the grain store, Marco's skill activated before the merchant finished his opening price. He produced an actual ledger showing last month's shipping records from River Valley Town, and the merchant's forehead broke into a cold sweat while I watched. We left with 20,000 pounds of grain, 30 bags of coarse salt, and a satisfied feeling of someone who has acquired a genuinely useful person at exactly the right moment. Marco arranged river transport before we'd finished loading. 3 flatboats, ready the following morning, arriving at Snow Eagle territory in 5 days. He traced the route on a mental map while explaining it, his finger drawing an arc in the air. He'd already contacted a fleet captain named Cole who ran mining ships on the same waterway. I looked at him and thought about the territory's chances of surviving winter, which had just improved measurably. The hall smelled of pine resin and old power. King Augustus VII sat on the black iron throne with the stillness of someone who has been sitting on thrones long enough that they've stopped noticing them. His old fingers tapped the armrest in the particular rhythm of a man thinking through several problems simultaneously. Horn Greystone's head was at the city gate. His land had no heir. The elf testimony bore the Silverpine clan's moonlight seal, and Augustus had apparently spent several private minutes reading the relevant sections carefully. He scanned the assembled nobles over the rim of what he held, and none of them met his eyes for long. Horn Greystone colluded with orcs to attack his neighbors, Augustus said slowly, and was then destroyed by those same orcs. I have never seen such comprehensive foolishness from a noble of this kingdom. He set the parchment down and asked, with the reasonable tone of a man who expects silence, whether anyone in the hall would like to take over the abandoned Greystone territory. The nobles discovered urgent interest in their own footwear. The Greystone lands were cold, orc-adjacent, financially ruined, and had managed to kill 3 consecutive knights in 10 years. The wealthy southern lords had not accumulated wealth by volunteering for situations like this. I stepped forward. The hall went quiet in a different way. The Bloodscar tribe has sworn loyalty to the Snow Eagle House under the ancient pact, I said. That alliance controls the main approach through the Frost Whisper Mountains. I know the terrain, I have established relationships with the Silverpine clan, and I have a functional garrison that has already tested itself against significant orc force. I looked at the king directly. The Greystone lands need a lord who understands what northern border defense actually requires, not one who needs to be explained it. Augustus studied me for a moment that lasted longer than most moments do. Do you understand what you're accepting? His voice carried the formal weight of someone making a record. 30 additional miles of border. The first banner raised when the battle drums sound. Soldiers eating frozen rations in deep snow while the capital enjoys its winter celebrations. I understand that someone has to do it, I said, and that the kingdom is better served by that person being competent. The laughter that came from Augustus was genuine, the startled kind that escapes when something surprises a man who rarely gets surprised. It echoed under the dome while the velvet-clad nobles stood very still. He stood and took a sword from a case that a servant had been holding ready, as though this had been prepared in advance. The blade was entirely black except for its edge, which held cold light and ancient runes along the fuller. "The Winter Oath," he said, his voice dropping into the formal register that kings use when they're making things official. "Given to the Guardians of the North 200 years ago." He placed it on my shoulder. "In the name of iron and blood, I, Augustus VII, King of Ontal, hereby knight you Baron of Frostfall, granting you governance of the Greystone lands and the charge to clear the northern border of orc incursion." The sword touched my other shoulder. "Your sword fights for the kingdom. Your blood is shed for the kingdom." The tip touched my forehead very lightly. "Rise, Baron Snowhawk. Go fulfill your oath. Mission update. Royal decree. Clear the Orc tribes from the Frostfall Mountains. Rebuild northern trade routes. Annual tribute. 20% of iron or profits." 3 days after the knighting ceremony, I was standing in the Royal Blacksmith District with a cart of seized Greystone armor and a dwarf who had opinions about everything. Grom iron anvil tapped each breastplate with his knuckles like a buyer at a market inspecting fruit. His red beard contained significant quantities of soot, and his assessment of the quality ranged from barely acceptable to insult to iron. When he found the dark red staining on the inner lining of one piece, blood or from the Blackwater Valley, distinctive for its sulfur content, his eyes changed. We negotiated. 15 gold coins for the full lot of 23 sets, or 15 gold coins plus his drunken apprentice. As if on cue, a small explosion of noise from the workshop interior announced that the apprentice had knocked over a barrel of something. The apprentice, Glendon, stumbled out covered in soot with a wineskin attached to his belt. His master's roar made the tools rattle on their hooks. 20 minutes later, Glendon was sitting behind me on a horse with his goat trotting on a lead rope, muttering about his tools and occasionally sipping from the wineskin. He had accepted my offer with the wounded dignity of someone who has been thrown out of better places than this. The road back to the capital gates ran past a group of young nobles returning from a hunt. Silk jackets, decorative swords, thin rabbits on their saddles. The complete aesthetic of people whose fathers bought them out of military service. The eldest son of the Dren family stretched his voice into the particular pitch of public mockery. The Snow Eagle Baron. I heard his territory is so cold that goblins wear 3 layers of fur. I looked at him. The system supplied his background automatically. A wealthy southern heir whose father had paid 300 gold dragons to extract him from a winter posting at Northwind Fortress, where he had apparently developed strong feelings about cold weather. Young Master Dren, I said pleasantly, I understand the winds at Northwind Fortress gave you some vivid memories. How are your toes these days? His face went the color of old snow. His hands tightened on the reins without conscious decision. Glendon took a long pull from his wineskin as we rode past. Why do those soft-palmed cowards look down on us from the north? He muttered. I touched the winter oath at my hip, the leather of the grip pressing against my palm. Because they can only see the capital's prosperity. They don't understand that the iron and blood of the northern border is what keeps the palace banquet halls stocked. Glendon considered this, then took another drink. Still think they should get frostbite once each, just to understand the principle. I didn't argue with him. The refugees from Greystone Mill Village were camped in the forest when we found them. 87 people in makeshift huts of branches and torn cloth, children stirring a pot of hot water with a few grains of wheat floating in it, an old man leaning on a cane with frostbite mapped across his face. I dismounted and stood in the snow beside their fire. I'm Richard Snowhawk, I said, the new Lord of Greystone. The old man looked at me with the careful neutrality of someone who has learned not to trust titles. From the Frost Peak Mountains to the Blackwater River, this land is mine now. As its lord, I have a responsibility to its people. I broke a piece of bread from the supply pack and handed it to the nearest elderly person before I finished the sentence.